Today's more than 800 million adults worldwide live with clinical obesity, a staggering figure that has nearly tripled over the last few decades. Why did this profound metabolic shift virtually never occur throughout 99% of our historical timeline? Is it possible that our ancient ancestors, the ultimate survival machines of the wild, carried the exact same biological triggers inside them all along? To understand this, we must look past the popular myths of history. Consider a real Homo sapiens from 50,000 years ago. This was not a grunting, hunched creature from a Hollywood movie. This was an individual with the exact same brain, the same lungs, and the exact same biological hardware running underneath their animal skin as you have right now. They possessed the same capacity for joy, the same daily hunger, and the same potential for making poor choices. Now, picture placing this ancient hunter directly into the cereal aisle of a modern grocery store. He is suddenly surrounded by 47 different types of cereal. One box features a bright cartoon tiger, telling him that the contents are great, though he has no concept of what a cartoon tiger means. He grabs a shopping cart, figuring out its purpose quickly because he has spent his entire life outsmarting apex predators. As he walks down the aisles, he passes rows of processed snacks, frozen meals, and a bakery filling the air with the rich aroma of fresh bread and sugar. Never in his existence has he experienced such a massive concentration of readily available energy. His brain reward pathways are lighting up completely. The essential question here is not about his emotional reaction or how he manages the checkout counter. The real question is whether this ancient survival machine, optimized by millions of years of evolution, could actually become clinically obese. We have been told a specific narrative our entire lives. We are taught that ancient humans were lean because they constantly ran, hunted, and walked miles every single day. We view them as prehistoric athletes, while viewing ourselves as disappointing descendants who sit on couches eating processed food late at night. But that common narrative is deeply incomplete. The real reason ancient humans did not experience obesity has almost nothing to do with how much they exercised. The biology they passed down to us is the very reason obesity became possible in the first place. Given the exact same modern conditions, an ancient human and a modern human will end up in the exact same physical state. To see this clearly, we must set the scene with precise context. We are not discussing Neanderthals or early hominids chipping rocks by a river 2 million years ago. We are talking about anatomically modern Homo sapiens. These were people who could walk into a modern coffee shop and blend in completely if they had a modern haircut and a jacket. They lived between roughly 300,000 and 10,000 years ago, long before the agricultural revolution transformed human society. They operated as hunter-gatherers, meaning their entire existence revolved around a single, unforgiving priority. They had to find food, consume it, avoid death, and repeat the process daily. Their diet was wildly and chaotically varied based on the season and the environment. They might eat large game one week, wild tubers and roots the next, followed by seasonal fruits, fish, eggs, or even protein-dense insects. There was no fixed menu, no daily schedule, and no concept of regular meal times. They simply asked themselves what they could find today, and whether the energy gathered was worth the energy spent. Ancient humans did not eat 3 structured meals a day plus snacks. They ate when food was physically present, and they starved when it was gone. Food routinely vanished for days or even weeks during harsh winters and severe droughts. There were no secondary pantries or delivery applications to save them. This was not a modern lifestyle choice, but the fundamental reality of their natural world. Most people look at this reality and draw an obvious conclusion. They assume ancient humans stayed thin because they burned massive amounts of energy while barely finding enough calories to function. However, this is exactly where modern science dismantles everything we thought we knew. Researchers have spent years studying the closest living equivalents to our ancestors, such as the Hadza people of northern Tanzania. The Hadza still hunt with handmade bows, forage for wild plants, and cover immense distances on foot every single day. The women dig up deep tubers from hard soil, while the men track wild game across the open savanna for hours. They do not use vehicles, and they do not sit at office desks for 8 hours a day. Their daily physical activity would completely exhaust an average modern person within a few days. Scientists placed precise activity trackers on Hadza adults to measure their exact daily calorie burn. Everyone expected the data to show that these foragers burned vastly more calories than a sedentary Western adult. But the results shocked the scientific community. A landmark study revealed that the total daily energy expenditure of the Hadza was statistically identical to adults living in Western nations. A Hadza woman, walking miles in the African heat, burns roughly the same number of calories per day as an office worker sitting at a computer. This seems impossible, but it is explained by a profound biological survival mechanism called metabolic adaptation. The human body is not a simple machine that expends more energy the harder you push it. The body acts like a highly cautious accountant. When you spend a large amount of energy on physical activity, the body quietly cuts energy spending elsewhere to keep the total budget balanced. The Hadza actually burn less energy when they are at rest. Their basal metabolic rate is lower than a typical Westerner. When adjusted for body size, the body dials back the immune system, runs cellular maintenance more efficiently, and shifts hormonal activity. This keeps the total daily calorie burn nearly identical between a traditional forager and a modern office worker. This is not a biological flaw, but evolution working perfectly to keep a human alive when food availability is uncertain. Therefore, physical activity alone was never the primary reason ancient humans stayed lean. The true reason was simple environmental scarcity. They could not get enough food consistently enough to maintain a prolonged caloric surplus. Without a sustained caloric surplus, the human body cannot accumulate the fat required for clinical obesity. The harsh environment was doing all the heavy lifting. Furthermore, the ancient human body was never neutral about storing fat. The human system was aggressively wired to accumulate as much fat as possible the moment food appeared. The body knew from deep evolutionary memory that a period of starvation was always coming. This reality is explained by the thrifty gene hypothesis, proposed by geneticists in the mid-20th century. Natural selection favored individuals who were exceptionally efficient at storing energy as fat during times of abundance. Those individuals were the ones who survived the inevitable famines that wiped out others. The genes that promote efficient fat storage were competitive advantages, not genetic accidents. The ancestor who could overeat berries and meat during a good season survived the winter, passing those exact genes down to us. Every single human alive today carries this exact genetic programming. Our ancestors did not remain thin because they possessed superior willpower or a desire to avoid fat. Their bodies desperately wanted to store fat, but the environment physically prevented them from succeeding. When you place that exact same calorie-obsessed biology into a modern world, the results are devastating. We now live in an environment where thousands of cheap calories are accessible within 5 minutes. We have seen this exact collision play out historically with the Pima people of Arizona. For thousands of years, they lived as active farmers and foragers in the desert, maintaining excellent metabolic health. In the late 19th century, upstream settlers diverted their water supply, causing their traditional agricultural systems to collapse. The government replaced their native diet with surplus supplies of refined flour, lard, canned goods, and processed sugar. Within a couple of generations, the Pima developed some of the highest rates of obesity and type 2 diabetes ever recorded. Their genetics had not changed at all, but their food environment had transformed completely. The proof lies in their direct relatives living across the border in the mountains of Mexico. Sharing the exact same ancestral DNA but maintaining a traditional diet, the Mexican Pima remained lean and metabolically healthy. The thrifty gene is a brilliant survival feature that becomes a destructive bug when the environment changes. Could an ancient human ever get fat within their own ancestral world? Theoretically, under highly specific conditions, it was possible. Certain coastal and river environments provided temporary seasonal abundance, such as the massive salmon runs in the Pacific Northwest. For a few weeks each year, rivers became dense, with high-fat, high-protein fish that were easy to catch. A population staying by the river could consume an immense caloric surplus for weeks. If this abundance coincided with an unusually mild winter, individuals could carry more body fat than usual. Yet, they still could not reach modern levels of clinical obesity. Natural foods, even rich ones, strongly activate the body's internal satiety signals. The natural fat and protein in wild salmon trigger hormones that tell the brain to stop eating. The fiber in wild tubers slows down digestion and fills the stomach. Natural diets create sensory-specific satiety, which naturally reduces your desire to eat a food once you have had enough. You can only consume a limited amount of wild salmon before your body forces you to stop. You cannot say the same for a modern bag of processed potato chips. A chip is engineered specifically to bypass your body's natural fullness signals. The precise ratio of salt, fat, and carbohydrates in ultra-processed food is calibrated to hit what scientists call the bliss point. This combination maximizes neurological pleasure while minimizing the internal feeling of fullness. It ensures that the next bite remains just as appealing as the first, keeping the brain reward loop running constantly. The ancient world possessed no such technology. Nature never creates a bliss point food because nature has no financial incentive to keep you overeating. Only a modern industry that profits from continuous consumption has that incentive. The archaeological record confirms this truth clearly. When anthropologists examine the skeletal remains of Paleolithic hunter-gatherers, they find signs of excellent metabolic health. Their bone density was remarkably high, and their joints showed patterns of healthy, varied movement. Their teeth showed minimal cavities because refined sugars did not exist to feed destructive oral bacteria. There is no skeletal evidence of the chronic metabolic diseases or joint stress associated with modern excess weight. Everything changed when agriculture emerged around 10,000 years ago. As humans settled down to farm crops and store grain, the skeletal record shifted dramatically. Average human height dropped by several inches in many populations within a few generations. Bone density decreased, cavities skyrocketed, and signs of iron deficiency anemia appeared in the bone tissue. Infectious diseases increased as people crowded into early permanent settlements. The great irony is that agriculture gave humanity a food surplus and allowed us to build civilizations. But the immediate biological cost to the individual human body was severe. A narrow diet centered on a single grain crop reduced nutritional variety. For the first time in history, human populations could exist in a state of prolonged caloric surplus. Agriculture did not cause instant mass obesity because farming still required intense physical labor. However, it broke the fundamental environmental constraint that had kept our fat-storing genes in check for hundreds of thousands of years. The modern grocery store was effectively born the day the first grain silo was built. Let us address the physical fitness argument directly. People assume that the intense physical demands of survival protected ancient humans from gaining weight, regardless of what they ate. While hunter-gatherers do possess higher muscle mass and lower body fat percentages, the fundamental energy equation remains the same. The Hadza are not lean because their high activity levels allow them to burn off excess food. They are lean because they consume an unprocessed, naturally filling diet that contains zero-engineered bliss point foods. If you gave a traditional foraging population unlimited access to a modern Western diet, they would gain weight rapidly despite keeping their active lifestyle. Their daily movement would not save them because the calorie intake side of the equation would completely overwhelm the system. Exercise is deeply vital for cardiovascular health, hormonal balance, and mental well-being. But physical movement alone is not an override switch for a poor diet, despite what the modern wellness industry claims. So, could an ancient human become obese in their native environment? The answer is almost certainly no. This was not due to superior moral discipline, better character, or some lost ancestral virtue. It was because the physical world strictly prevented the sustained caloric surplus required for obesity to form. Scarcity was the baseline setting of existence, and natural food was the only food that existed. Their bodies wanted to store fat, but the world simply did not provide the raw materials to do so. If you drop that same ancient human into our world today, they face the exact same vulnerability as any modern person. They would confront ultra-processed items designed to override satiety, sedentary desk jobs, and artificial blue light disrupting their sleep cycles. They would experience chronic psychological stress, raising their appetite hormones, alongside applications that deliver thousands of calories instantly. They would likely be even more vulnerable because they lack any cultural framework for nutritional restraint. Their brain, encountering a fast food menu for the first time, would view it as the greatest survival jackpot in human history. Every deep ancestral instinct would scream at them to eat everything immediately to prepare for the coming winter. This reveals a profound truth about who we are today. We are ancient humans living in a modern world. We carry the exact same genetic code, the same metabolic architecture, and the same hormonal reward pathways. The evolutionary gap between a human 50,000 years ago and you right now is practically nothing. The body that evolved over millennia to survive severe scarcity is now drowning in engineered abundance. The system is not broken, but is doing exactly what it was designed to do in an environment it was never meant to face. When you find it difficult to stop eating processed snacks, that is not a personal character flaw. That is your ancient nervous system encountering an item specifically designed to prevent you from feeling satisfied. When a sweet dessert fails to make you feel full, that is your satiety hormones being bypassed by modern food chemistry. When you are completely full but still want dessert, that is your ancient survival circuitry responding to fat and sugar. Your brain still believes that this moment of abundance is rare and must not be wasted. The ancient hunter-gatherer is not a distant myth or a simple cautionary tale. He is the direct explanation for our modern struggles. He never became obese because his world would not allow it. We changed his world, and now we are living with the consequences.